Welcome to Narratives and Nightcaps, Books, Beverages, and Author Conversations. Today, I am joined by author Whitney Welsh Gibbs, whose latest work, The Land of Frost, Book 1 in the Steel Citadel series, releases on March 18th. Hello, Whitney. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you. I know I kind of gave that away to you before we started recording, but I'm so,
Sure.
so, so excited for listeners and everyone to hear about your book. But first, before we do
Uh-huh.
that, do you have any sort of pairing for this book that you would recommend or just a favorite drink that you've been sipping on lately?
I've been thinking about this because you kind of prepped me for this. So I was trying to think about it, and I thought the book. I'm a real G&T girl. I'm a gin and tonic girl. But I think the book needs something a little bit stronger or like a good warm drink with it. So I went between like maybe like a real hard whiskey or like a nice tea, like a dark tea. So I was thinking one of my favorites is an RMS Titanic tea, which is a black tea with an oolong in it. It's a mixture. And so I thought that would go perfect with it because it's nice and warm. It's, a little heavier. It's like one of those kind of like darker teas that you drink. And I thought that would go perfect with like the setting of the book, the colder kind of environment. So yeah, I think that's what I would be drinking if I was reading.
Oh yeah, that's so good. Yeah, something nice and warm and cozy would go
Yes.
really, really well with the setting for
Mm.
this. So let's talk about that. Can you give us a
Yeah.
quick overview of The Land of Frost?
Yeah, I can. So, The Land of Frost is an adult fantasy, and it starts on the wedding day of our main character, Princess Maeve Moran, and a coup breaks out on her wedding day and takes the lives of her father, her mother, her brother, and her fiance, as well as her magic. She lives in a magic kingdom. And the story really follows Maeve coming out of this kind of really terrifying situation of this coup breaking out and almost losing her life, and her seeking revenge for her family's death. And so it's like a really cool revenge story. There's a lot of secrets revealed. It's a little bit of a mystery, and it follows her all the way to what I call the Land of Frost.
It's so good. I mean from page 1 to you're talking about the coup and everything, like page 1, the
Mm-hmm.
action is there for readers. I mean, just
Yeah.
immediately. I I mean, I was reading this like at the gym, and I remember I was sitting on the bike when I started it, and
Yeah.
I'm like reading on the bike and everything, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like we're just jumping right into to this world. It was so exciting. But before we talk about all of that, take me back to the beginning of this book. Where did your idea come from? When did you start writing this?
Yeah, it was an interesting kind of journey for me. So I started having the idea for this story about 4 years ago. I had a dream about it, and it was just kind of like a little excerpt of a dream almost. And I had this dream about this coup that breaks out on a princess's wedding day. And, her just that kind of idea of seeking revenge. I didn't really have a full fledged story for it, but I had that idea of that. And, like, how cool would that be to explore, like, this princess who's kind of like left for dead? And then what does she do next? So that's where it started. And then I didn't do anything with it. I started writing some other things. I wrote a contemporary romance, and I had a young adult fantasy duology that I wrote in that time. And then I was on a trip with my best friend. We travel like every year. We take a trip, and we usually take books with us to read because, of course, we need something to do. And we read like Akatar, and then all of a sudden jumped into Fourth Wing after that, after the trip was over. So we had kind of like that, that little tunnel that takes you right
Yep.
down through into Romantasy. And I said to her one day, I was sitting there, I said, a few years ago, I had this dream about this story, and I was thinking maybe this is the right time to write it down. I'm kind of re-energized now that I've read, all these new books and things like that. And she was like, well, why don't you do it? And I was like, well, why don't I do it? And so I sat down and I started kind of fledging it out. The first chapter I kind of knew what I wanted to do with it, and then the rest I really had to sit down and kind of forge through. But I started writing in December of 2023,
Okay.
And I wrote this book nonstop every single day. The first draft was done in 2 months. And then, yeah, it was crazy. I just wrote like constantly because I couldn't stop writing. And then I started kind of, going through it, polishing it a little bit, sent it out. I did queries for it, and it got picked up by a publisher really kind of quick. It was not like the normal story for books. Usually it takes a long time. I first heard back from my publisher, Azala Press, in, I want to say, May. Or early June, and they said, hey, can we have a full manuscript? They asked me for the full manuscript. I'm like, oh, okay, sure. And I sent it to them, and I didn't think anything was going to come of it. Didn't hear from them for maybe a month or so, 2 months. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting on the couch one night watching, I think I was watching Bridgerton or something, catching up. And, just cozy night in. And I got a message on Instagram from someone named MK Ahern. And I said, I don't know who this is. And it just says, I couldn't, like, the end of the Land of Frost just made me throw my Kindle, like my jaw was on the floor. And I was like, who read this book? Oh my goodness, who has my manuscript? And I had to think about it, and I kind of like Googled her, and I went, oh, it's this press I sent it to. And so I wrote her back. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited you liked it. She's like, you'll be hearing from me next week. I just needed to tell you. I couldn't put it down. I loved it. And so that was kind of the
I
journey
had a
with it.
similar reaction too. I want like, but I was like, I don't want to jump the gun. Like, I don't want to overwhelm her. She's got a lot going
No,
on
you're
right
good.
now. I had a similar reaction.
I'm so glad. That's what I want from it. So.
Oh, that's perfect. Amazing. That is really, really cool. So that
Yeah.
and yeah, in like the normal book world, that is relatively short, like 2 years if you started writing in 2023. I mean, really
Yeah.
not like too terribly long. That's so exciting.
Wasn't long. Yeah.
Um, so in talk to me a little bit about writing a fantasy book though, because I mean, even like we have this amazing glossary at the beginning of your book, which thank you for that, by the way, because like
Sure.
I personally love those. And if anyone's ever listened to another episode of this podcast, we all know like I'm terrible at names, so I love it
Mm.
when when we're given some guidance on that. But talk
Yeah.
to me a little bit about like what your writing process was like. I know you got the first draft out really quickly, but like where do you even begin to create this type of world?
It's important to me, as a writer, to really fledge out that world, make sure that it feels like something that the reader could walk into. So first and foremost, where I always start is, what does this world look like? I need to know as much about it as I possibly can, even more than, starting with who are the characters. I want to know where I'm setting this story. So the world building was very important to me. I also don't like info dumps in books, so I want the world building to feel natural as you go through a story, like you're learning as you go, because I don't want an info dump. I won't remember anything, and I'll be very frustrated if I'm reading a book and I've just gotten like, you know, 10 chapters at the beginning about what the world is like. I just don't love that. So I wanted to build out the story, build out the world itself. I am very meticulous. I build like, I don't know if you've ever used Notion. I was turned
Yeah.
on by it yeah. So my best friend's husband uses it for D&D. So he said, "Hey, how about you try this out?" And I love it. I will always use it, and I build out my world there. And I answer like really meticulous questions. What is the world like? What is the currency like? What do they eat? What type of clothes do they wear? What's the architecture? All those things. Just so I am like very familiar with that world, because I want it to feel real. And then I start kind of fledging out that story. So the story really builds with based on where the world is and what the setting is. So that was always really important to me from the start, because I love fantasy. I am a fantasy reader first and foremost. It's my favorite genre, and I always have been. And I want to build fantasy that people of all ages can really enjoy. Whether I'm writing a YA book or I'm writing an adult book, I want those stories to be enjoyable to those readers. And I really, I really concentrate on that. So that's where the story really began, was like the idea of this kingdom and like the kingdom politics, because I really love that. It's kind of more of like the Game of Thrones kind of side of me, that I like the kingdom politics. I like kind of exploring, what could happen if this happened and that happened, and I've always really enjoyed that. So building out those kingdom politics, the characters that you'll meet, the diversity of, the kingdom, those were really important to me to build out. First and foremost, because I wanted to say, I sat down and thought, what would a kingdom be like if I was the one to kind of build it? Not necessarily perfect, obviously, because there has to be some sort of issues there. But what would I value in the culture? What would I value in, the arts and that sort of thing? So that was really important to me to build out as well. And so that's where it really started. It was just, let's explore this world. Let's kind of take it, for a ride. And this is the first book in the series. But the series will explore that world a little bit more, because, it's such a rich place to be, and it really is the center of the story.
Yeah, you set it up really well and I've even thought about that. I'm like, there's so much more of this world that we have yet to see. So I don't
Yeah.
want to jump the gun, but like, do you know how many books you have planned for this series?
I do. It's a 4-book series, and we have planned release dates. I can't tell you when, but they are already planned. I can tell you book 2 is coming later in 2025. Um, so
Oh,
yeah,
you just
so
made
pretty
my
soon.
day.
Yeah, I know. I'm so excited.
Okay, that just I can't wait for my husband to get home so I can tell him that because I have just I told him I was like it's really, like I'm so grateful to like be able to talk with you and authors like you and oftentimes get to like read your book in advance. I go, the
Mhm.
hard part is when it ends on a cliffhanger and all of
Yeah,
a sudden I'm like, when is the next one?
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's
No,
so
it's all
exciting. Oh
planned
my
out.
goodness. Whitney, you're so busy.
I am so busy. I am really busy right now. Actually, I not to spoil anything, I wrote for 11 months straight last year. So I've been taking a little bit of time off writing. I've had like a couple months off where I'm not touching anything, but that doesn't mean that this story isn't going to be told. I mean, I did 11 months solid of writing, and just kind of immersing myself in this world. So it's been like a busy year or so of just kind of this, and then getting a publishing contract, and kind of promoting everything, which is insane in and of itself, and going through editing and things like that. So it's actually just, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. No, that's so exciting though. That's really, really cool that you have it like all planned out right now and I cannot
Mhm.
wait to hear more. That's for sure. There's
Yeah.
so many things I want to touch on, but one thing, well, a
Sure.
couple of things, I guess. What was, without totally spoiling anything, what was your favorite scene to write?
Ooh. That's a good question, because I like so many of them. I really liked writing the first chapter because it just sets up everything, and I loved kind of just getting into like that moment, and it just kind of plops you right into like that world. So I really enjoyed that. But what I really liked is there's a scene in there I call the bonfire scene. And I absolutely loved writing that scene, because I always say that's the scene where you start to see the characters as they are truly for the first time. You've kind of established like who you think they are and your kind of assumptions of them, and the other characters' assumptions of them. But that's where you start to really see the main characters' personalities come out. Their real, how they treat one another, and it just kind of evolves the story. And so I love that scene. I That's the one I like to go back to and just kind of read it and go, oh, okay, I love this. But yeah, no, that's one of my favorite scenes, I think.
Would you say that that's also like one that you're most excited for readers to get to?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I have an intern that she helps me a lot with social media. I'm so lucky to have her. Her name's Judy, and when she came on, she said, I don't know how to promote a book that I've never read. And I was like, I've got you. Don't worry. I'll send you the
Fair.
manuscript. And so she read it, and I remember her reading that scene, and she's like, finally, that was her reaction. And she's texting me as it. So I really am. I'm excited for readers to read it. I think their reaction will be like, finally, too. And, just know that I felt the same way when I wrote it. So,
Now,
yeah.
on the flip side, which scene
Uh-huh.
was the most challenging?
Ooh, there's a few scenes that are really challenging. But I think that it's always hard kind of to figure out where you're going to go with like new characters or fledge them out. So I really I was challenged when I was starting to write um, her journey coming to, without spoiling anything, coming to this place called Boskagar Prison. Um, Only because I wanted to do it justice, and I didn't want to write, from a perspective that I've never been in a prison. Like, I don't know what that's like. I can envision it probably, and I'd probably say it's terrifying, but I don't know what that's like. So that was a little bit hard for me to kind of wrap my head around, like, what would these people be like that are here that she's going to encounter? Can we put a spin on that? Can we challenge the reader and their assumptions of like what she's going to encounter here? Because, maybe all's not as it seems. And how do we do that with still conveying that this is not a great place to be, and that these people are probably not great people to be around, even if there might be something more to them. And so that was a little bit of a challenge of like a balance of, let's not let the reader forget. She might befriend some of these people. She might get to know them in a sense. But let's not forget she's in a prison. They've been here for a long time, probably, for the most part, these prisoners, and they're going to be hardened prisoners no matter what their backstory is. So it was kind of like that balance of like trying to figure out how to show that, and not lose that story element of like, oh, we're going to connect with some characters here, and we're going to we're going to have a fun time. But yeah, remember it's not a great situation.
Oh, no, that's so interesting. Well, you did an amazing job developing that because yeah,
Oh, thank you.
it's so true. No matter, I mean, obviously, she gets there and there is sort of this like, okay, maybe things aren't all that they seem. We don't have the full story yet. She doesn't
Right.
have the full story yet for
Yeah.
like what this place really is. But no matter why the other prisoners have been sent there, like some of them have been isolated for decades
Yeah.
in this one location. So, and
Yeah.
that would change a person no matter
Yeah.
what. Wa-
Exactly.
Wow, that's okay. That's really interesting. But yeah, that would be really challenging. Well done. Um,
Thank you.
so you did prior to this, you self-published three other books, yes?
I did. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So many questions on that. So I
Sure.
guess, did you know all along that you wanted to query this one?
I think I did. I started writing it and I thought, I don't think I am the one that needs to handle all this. I've done it with a few other books that were, they were well received, but not well read, I would say. They didn't get into the hands of tons of readers. It's not my strong point to market them. It's my strong point is to write the story. And with this story in particular, I had such a passion for it from like the moment I started writing it that I thought, I don't think I'm the right person to take this on. I'm the right person to write it, but I'm gonna need somebody else in my court. And so I think I really did always think I was gonna query and try to figure it out. I didn't know if it was ever gonna get picked up. I'm so thankful that it fell into the hands of who it did. But I didn't, I just expected trying for a while and hoping that something would come of it. I was so incredibly blessed, but yeah, it was just incredible to do that, and I knew from the start like that was where it needed to be because I think it needs the readers that it can gain from traditional publishing.
That's amazing. Well, and what I've seen from just, I mean, high level, but seeing what your partnership is like with Azala Press, like they seem really involved and
Yeah.
amazingly supportive, which is really, really cool to see.
It is cool. It's interesting because they're not a big five, so you're not getting, like the big five experience, but I think what we're getting is a little bit better in some ways because it's a personalized experience. They're always in our court. We have a small group of authors under the Azala Press name right now, under the umbrella. There's about, I want to say 10 of us or so. So it's not huge, but each one of us is like rooting each other on. We're all friends. We have like a Discord where we talk to each other every single day. Our publisher is very involved. She's, texting us day in and day out. What do you need? What can we do? What are your ideas? And she's very passionate about giving us our creative autonomy. So we have full say in everything that happens with our books. So it's such a different experience, but it's such a good experience to have somebody like in your court rooting for you, and then also saying like, you're the creative here. We're not trying to stifle your creativity. We just, we want to partner with you. And that's what they are. They're partners.
That's amazing. What would you say having now, I mean, it's really neat that you've had like both experiences though from self-publishing and
Right.
traditional publishing because not everybody has both. Um for maybe it's the same answer, but for both self-publishing and then traditional publishing, what surprises you the most about the entire process? And maybe it's two different answers, maybe it's the same. I'm just curious.
Yeah. With self-publishing, what surprised me the most was kind of the people that are passionate about self-publishing and about supporting self-published authors. There's a great movement now, and I think it's because of the accessibility of being able to publish your own work, where there are people that are just like diehards for like indie self-published like authors. And I think that's really cool. I didn't expect that. I'm really appreciative of it. But I didn't expect that. So that kind of surprised me about that. But there was also challenges that surprised me. I didn't realize how much work would go into self-publishing a book. I think I was a little naive at first with that, and then I'd have to go back and correct things that I didn't do right. That's just a learning experience. And there's pros and cons with everything, of course, right? With self-publishing and with traditional publishing, there's always pros and cons. With traditional publishing, I'm in a really cool situation where I just love my publisher and I have a great experience. But I was just surprised at how accessible publishing can be when your story falls into the right hands, and how really it opens up the world to, your stories and that sort of thing. And I was surprised by that because, you have assumptions like, if you're with the big five, you even have assumptions that like, this is going to go this way or that way or whatever. I going with a small press, my assumption was, well, I hope it gets on shelves, like I still hope it gets on shelves. But I was just pleasantly surprised by how kind of like the world opens up when you say like, I'm a author under this press. The world just kind of opens up to you, and people are so excited for your book to come out in different ways. And it's like kind of the polar opposite of like the self-publishing kind of like people that are real excited about self-published authors. There's that other side of it where people are like, oh, now you're legitimate, and you're like, well, I was always kind of legitimate, but yeah, sure, I am. I've got this name behind me, and so that was surprising too in a way. And I thought, that's neat. It's a neat experience. People are like, oh wow, I could get your book actually. I'm like, yeah, you can get my book.
You
you
can
can
actually
read
get
my
all of them.
exactly. Yeah, try the other ones too. They're pretty good.
That's so funny. No, I mean, there is sort of this perception. I do feel like we're like sort of breaking those barriers and breaking down those walls that did come with
Yeah.
self-publishing, which is amazing. But
Uh-huh.
it's still there for sure. But all that said, I mean, there's something to be said just for like having a partnership and to your
Uh-huh.
point, like having people in your corner because it's hard. Like, it's hard
It
to
is
write a
hard.
book. It's hard to publish that book, no matter what path you go down. It's
Yeah.
hard to do. So the fact that you essentially have a team now to really like advocate for you and your book and help get it out into the world, because
Mhm.
anybody that loves fantasy is going to love this. Truly, like I'm so excited. I know I have so many friends who are fantasy readers, and I'm like, everyone, I'm like, this one, pre-order this one. I'm like, you have to get this one. I promise, like, if you like this, you'll like that. Um, And you mentioned Game of Thrones earlier too, and
Yeah.
I've thought the same thing too. And my husband's a big fan of Game of Thrones, and I'm like, it's kind of got those vibes. Like
Yeah.
it's it's a little bit like that. And he's read Fourth Wing too, and I'm like if you like Fourth Wing, you'll like this. You know, it
Mhm.
definitely speaks to those readers for sure. What what do you hope readers take away from The Land of Frost?
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, I want them to enjoy the ride. I think it's a wild ride from start to finish. I keep seeing like when I get these glimpses, like I told you, I kind of have tried to like cover my eyes and not see everything that arc readers are saying. But when I get these glimpses, they're like, "Wow, it was so fast paced. It was all that," and I'm like, "Yes, I'm so glad that you got this," and that they like the world building and things like that. So I'm happy with that. But I do think that there is a story here, and I've always tried to do it. I don't know if I told you when I was, talking to you about coming on, but this story is based on Irish folklore and history. So I'm a historian by trade. I have a history degree. So that was always really interesting to me, was like the history behind different cultures and that sort of thing, and like how it could really change, how people perceive other people, or the things that happen, why do they happen, that sort of thing. So there's a story in here that there is to uncover, and it is one of, the idea of what if something is suppressed from, what if a story, what if knowledge is suppressed from you and suppressed from everyone? What happens if that knowledge is not there, and if you have to learn it for the first time, and what would happen to a culture if they didn't know the whole story about their own history, and if maybe even one section was the only one that knew the story of your history, what would happen, and how would that change how a society kind of lived, and things like that. So I want them to take away that there's probably a little bit more here than that meets the eye. So I did write it as a romantasy, so there is that romance element to it, there's the fantasy element to it, but there is this dialogue that I think will continue on throughout the series. I know will continue on throughout the series. I shouldn't say think. I know. But that it will continue on throughout the series of like what happens in society if we're not being told everything. And that's really important to me because I think we can speak to that throughout history. What has happened when we're not told everything? It was funny. My brother asked me. He said, your map looks like Ireland," and I said, "Yeah, I know it looks like Ireland. Thanks for noticing." And he said, "Is there a reason for that?" And I said, "Oh yes, let me tell you." And I was kind of explaining to him, and I said, "Do you notice that there's one section that's kind of cut off from the rest in the north, and there might be some significance to that and things like that?" And he's like, "Oh, so there's something deep here." And I'm like, "Yeah, there's something deep here." So I do hope readers can. I think you can read it completely for the vibe. My best friend, she is a vibe reader. We will reread books multiple times just so that we can get more out of it, because like even with Fourth Wing, she was like, just I'm more of like I do vibe read for sure. I think we all do at some point. But like with Fourth Wing, she blasted through it the first time we read it, and then ask her about something. She go, "Wait, I don't think I got that." And so we've read it like 3 or 4 times together. Now she gets it a lot. But yeah, I think you could enjoy this story even without that. But if you want to dive in, there's a lot there that you can dive into, and I hope readers do, and I hope they kind of find the seeds that have been planted, because there are seeds for the whole entire series planted in this book, and it gets exciting to me. I'm a real huge fan of like Easter eggs and hidden things that somebody said, "Well, I figured out the end before we got to the end." I said, "Well, good, you're paying attention." That's good. But yeah, there's Easter eggs, so I hope that they do dive in and kind of see what's there.
That is a good thing. Well, I definitely picked up on some of those things, but no, I think reading for vibes is totally good. But the fact that there are layers, there's so much more to this. I love the historical ties. Like I absolutely love it when books do that, and you can kind of pick on real scenarios that this could potentially be linked to. I think that that is
Mhm.
really neat. But that speaks a lot to like different readers too, for who would
Right.
all enjoy like a fantasy series. So that's amazing. Keep saying it. I'm a broken record, but I cannot wait to see where it goes. Um, what would be switching gears a little bit, but
Sure.
what would be like your recommendation for anyone who's like an aspiring writer, or I mean, let's just even say like someone that's self-publishing but wants to maybe traditionally publish too?
I always say go for it. Try no matter what. You know, when I've had a few kind of people I've connected with over the years of starting to write my, self-publishing and then into this year where I feel like as soon as I got a publishing deal, everybody was coming to me and asking me questions about it. And I was like, I I really don't have all the answers, but I always say write no matter if you think you're good or not. You can always improve. So take that story, that if you have a story to write down, write it. If you are self-publishing now, and you want to go the traditional route, don't be afraid to query, because the worst they can say is no. And you can still get your story out there. If you're passionate enough about it, you can still do it. Um, if you have never published anything, but you have this story ready to go, try both ways. Why not? Explore, figure it out, see, ask questions. There's always a wealth of people that will answer your questions, and especially me. If you slide into my DMs and say, hey, do you have any advice, I will always be there to help or to beta read whatever you're writing or something, because I think it's so important that if we have a voice and we have a story that we're trying to put it down on paper, that we actually do try, because what could be taken away from you after you try? Like, it's an experience and nobody can take that from you. Nobody can change that. You've done it. And if you decide that you need to do it better next time, that's cool. That's absolutely fine. I've done that. My first books, I think this, obviously, The Land of Frost, I would say, is my best book to date. But I mean, I learned so much writing my other books. I still have such a great love for them. They're for different types of readers, obviously, but I love them, and they've grown me, and nobody can take that experience away from me now. I've had it, and I think it's so important. And yeah, I think just go for it. Don't be afraid. You've got one life to live. Why not?
That's really great advice. Did you know that you always wanted to be an author? You said that you actually have a degree for history, which I'm very jealous of because I think that is so cool and like wish that I had done that. But did you know that you always wanted to be a writer, or did you have like a different plan in mind initially?
I've always been a big reader. That was always every my family would always joke. They're like, "Oh, Whitney's probably read the book for this." If there was like a movie or something, "Oh, Whitney's probably read it." And I probably did. It was probably the truth. It wasn't even
Fair.
really a joke. But I was always a big reader. I didn't see myself as a creative. My brother is a film director, so all the creativity in like my household went to him, which was like fine. He's so good at what he does. But so I didn't see myself as that creative because I was watching him be really creative. So you start to kind of compare yourself, and it's a completely different thing. So for a long time, I have a bachelor's in military history, and then I have a master's in intelligence and security studies. I went to school to be a spy. Um, and
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah, so I was on a completely different track, but I wasn't feeling fulfilled. And I had these stories that I've always wanted to tell. And so I said, why don't you try it? Something's got to stick that makes you feel happy and fulfilled. And it might not be these things that you've done all this study on, and that's okay to kind of just try to start again. And so I did. I tried it out. Kind of see what happens. But it wasn't really in my plan, but I'm so happy it is now because it was just, such a cool experience. And now that's all I want to do is write. And, that's all
That's
I
all I
do.
want you to
I,
do. That's all I want you to do because I just love where your mind is at with this series and everything. So, and like I said, you've made my day telling me that book two will be out before the end of the year at least. So that's amazing. Um, oh, My watch is talking to me now too,
No,
which
that's
happens
okay.
occasionally. Um, okay, so you're a big reader, and obviously, in addition to our author conversations, this is heavily a book and reading podcast. So,
Sure.
what would be some recommendations that you would have for other readers out there?
Ooh, let's see. So, growing up, a book that really defined me was Perks of Being a Wallflower. I don't know if you've ever read it.
I have great
I'm
book.
obsessed with it. Yep, obsessed with it. But since I love fantasy, I grew up reading fantasy. So, as a kid, I was like 7 when Harry Potter came out. So, like, our whole family read it together. So, anything in the fantasy realm. I am a huge Fourth Wing fan. I don't know if obviously you said your husband read Fourth Wing, so I'm thinking you have too.
I have.
Um,
I have.
I actually
I've
went to
read
the
I've read Iron Flame and Onyx Storm too, so you're free to talk about them.
Perfect. So I went to the Onyx Storm midnight release with Rebecca Yaros. I live in Los Angeles. Yeah. So it was amazing. It was incredible. We were actually, my best friend and I were like, a dynamic duo. We do everything together. And we're so lucky we got these tickets because they sold out in like 30 seconds. But we went to the Grove. We were there 12 hours or something ridiculous. We were the second people in line, and we were front row for her Q&A, and I was dying because I was just like, you're such an inspiration, it's so great. But no, I'm a huge fan of Fourth Wing. I suggest it to everyone if they like fantasy and they want to kind of move into that adult realm of fantasy. But I honestly read everything. I read a couple years ago, because I had gotten into writing like romance. I wrote a contemporary romance that I'm very super proud of. It's called Broken Anchors. I read Sally Rooney at that time, and Normal People, and I loved that book. It was such a different experience for me. Like, the writing style was different, but I loved it.
I
You've read
will.
it.
I've read it and I love it too. I know that her writing style is kind of controversial. And I
Sure.
get that it's like maybe not for everybody. I loved Normal People. And then I loved the show on Hulu too.
Yeah.
Have you watched it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I loved Normal People. And then Megan, my co-host, we both read Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney together.
Okay.
Have you
Yeah.
read that one yet?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, what'd you think of that?
I enjoyed that too. Yeah.
It, I will say, the only thing is when I read her, well, especially Beautiful World, Where Are You? Not Normal People as much. Normal People took me a second to get into just because it's a very
Sure.
different writing style, but I really enjoyed it. Beautiful World, Where Are You? We joked, we were like, I don't think we're smart enough for
Yeah. Takes you a minute, doesn't it?
it does. Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. But yeah, no, I like Sally Rooney too, so that's amazing.
Yeah.
Have you read
Yes.
her newest one? Wasn't it Intermezzo? Was that her latest one?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't read it yet,
I haven't read
but
it
I'm
yet.
gonna have to. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
Okay, those are good
Sweet.
recommendations. Yeah, we're
Sure.
very much in sync on all that we read.
Seems like it.
I'm so jealous that you were at Rebecca Yaros's Q&A. That's really cool.
Oh, it was so
I
fun.
just watched the
It was a
clips
dream come true.
online.
Yeah. You might see me in a couple.
I'll have to look out now. I'll have to look
Yeah.
out. That's no, for sure. Um, okay, so March 18th is officially the day. Do you have
Yes.
plans to celebrate, or what are you going to do to mark this milestone?
Oh, well, I took the day off work. I said, I'm not coming in. I can't. I work as a director at a nonprofit right now. That's my current day job. So, busy lady, of course. But I took the day off. I will probably go have a celebratory dinner out with friends because so as I say, my best friend, as I've talked about her a lot, she will get a shout out. My best friend's name is Megan too. So there you go. But she read this book, The Land of Frost, chapter by chapter as I wrote it. This is her book. I always say, like, this series would not be anything without her because she was the one that told me you should write it. She read it every day she'd be like, where's my next chapter? Like, what are you doing? Are you just sitting around playing? Because like you're writing now. I'm obsessed. So she read it chapter by chapter. She's read it about 3 times now. We just did a reread when I got my full edits back and kind of sat down together and refreshed, because I'm like, oh, I probably have to refresh on this. It's been a little while since I read it. So we'll probably go out and celebrate, because she's been as much in this process as I have. It's insane. Her dedication to it is just crazy. But then I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I know my publisher and I were talking about bookstores maybe and doing a little party, but we don't have anything solidified as of today, but we'll see. And if we do, I'll let you guys know on, social media and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that would be awesome to see. I wish we were closer because I would definitely be there if
Yeah.
you were going to be in my area. But if you come down to Florida, let me know.
Oh, there's always a chance.
There we go. Yeah, I can send you bookstores. Send you some,
Perfect.
send you some bookstores as options. So that would be amazing. Well, in the meantime, though, where can readers, writers, anyone in general connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Whitney Writes Stuff. Very professional name. Whitney Writes Stuff. And on Threads as well, Whitney Writes Stuff. On TikTok, I am Whitney Welsh Gibbs. And my website is whitneygibbsauthor.com. So you can find me at all those places. I will also be in Georgia on October 18th. I will be a attending author for the Nevermore book convention and ball. So if anybody's going to be there, you can connect with me in person there as well.
Very cool. That's awesome. You have a super exciting year ahead of you. I'm
I do.
thrilled to be a part of your journey and to watch it grow over this year. I cannot wait for everyone to read The Land of Frost come March 18th. Pre-order if you haven't already, you definitely can. And then it'll be in your hands on March 18th. Whitney, it has been so wonderful to talk with you. So nice to meet you. Thank you again for coming on the show. I'm so excited for readers and it's so happy for you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's been so great.
Of course. Cheers.
Cheers.